At first, I thought it was love. The way he looked at me, like he already knew me, like I wasn't someone he had just met, but someone he had been waiting for. There was something unsettling about it. Not obvious, not enough to question, just enough to feel. And I ignored it, because it felt good to be seen like that, to be looked at like you matter before you've even proven anything, before you've earned anything, before you've even spoken. And maybe that's where it started, not with him, but with the part of me that wanted to be chosen without effort. Because months later, I would realize something I still haven't fully made peace with. He didn't fall in love with me. He studied me. We didn't meet the way people usually meet. There was no awkward introduction, no hesitation, no space for uncertainty, just a look. And something in that look felt familiar, like recognition, like we had already crossed that invisible line people take time to reach.
"Viola," he said, before I introduced myself. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do with that moment. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer directly. He just smiled. "I have heard of you." That should have been enough to question, but it wasn't, because the way he said it didn't feel invasive. It felt natural, like I had been expected, like I had arrived somewhere I was already known. And that feeling, that quiet sense of belonging without effort, it's dangerous, because you don't question something that feels like home. Adrian Cole didn't try to impress me. He didn't need to. There was no performance, no exaggerated charm, no visible effort. He listened. And not the kind of listening people fake while waiting for their turn to speak. The kind that makes you slow down. That makes you feel like your words are being placed somewhere carefully. "You're not like most people," he told me one night. We were sitting in silence when he said it. No build-up, no setup, just a statement. And I remember the way he looked at me when he said it. Not with admiration, not with curiosity, but with certainty. It was small, so small it didn't deserve attention. "Don't wear that tonight." His voice was calm. No tension, no force, just direction. I looked at him, half amused. "Why?" "It just doesn't suit you." There was no argument, no insistence, no pressure, and somehow, that made it easier. If he had pushed harder, I might have resisted. If he had raised his voice, I might have questioned it. But he didn't. He made it feel like a suggestion. And I changed, without thinking about it, without realizing what that meant. Because nothing was taken from me. I gave it. And that's what made it invisible. Some days, he was everything. Present in a way that made the world feel quieter. Like everything outside of him didn't matter as much. He would look at me like I was the only thing in the room. And in those moments, I believed it. Other days, he disappeared. Not physically. He was there, sitting next to me, responding, present, but not really. Like something had been turned down, emotionally. There was no explanation, no reason, no event that justified the shift. Just distance. And when he came back, it was stronger, more intense, more focused. And I didn't understand why the absence affected me more than the presence ever did. More urgent, more real, or at least, that's what I told myself. The changes didn't happen all at once. They never do. They happen in ways that don't feel like changes, more like adjustments. I spoke a little less, not intentionally, just less. I shared fewer things, not because I didn't want to, but because I started thinking about how they would be received. I reached out to people less, because it felt easier to stay within the space that already existed. And at some point, I noticed something.
I was thinking before I spoke, not in a normal way, in a calculated way, filtering, adjusting, removing parts of myself that didn't fit as smoothly. And I couldn't remember when that started. In public, Adrian was flawless, attentive, engaging, effortless. People admired him. They admired us. And I played my role perfectly, because that version of us worked. It made sense. It looked right. But the moment we were alone, something shifted. Not enough to explain, not enough to point at, just enough to feel. And the strange part was this. I felt more relaxed when people left. Not because I was happier, but because I didn't have to maintain anything. I didn't have to perform the version of us that made sense to others. Don't interrupt. Let me finish. Think before you speak. They sounded reasonable, structured.
And I agreed, because disagreeing required energy, and agreeing cost less. It was always easier. The first real crack came quietly. A name. Sophie Lane. It appeared on his phone for less than a second, and disappeared just as quickly. But something about it stayed. Not as a thought, as a feeling. Something that didn't align. Days passed. I didn't bring it up. Didn't ask. Didn't react. But it didn't leave. Eventually, I mentioned it. Casually. Carefully. Like it didn't matter. He didn't hesitate.
He smiled, explained everything clearly, every detail, every gap filled, every question answered before it was asked. You're overthinking. And I nodded, because what he said made sense. It was complete, logical, clean. But something in me didn't move. Every time he said that, you're overthinking. Something inside me got quieter, like a volume being turned down slowly. Not enough to notice at once, but enough to change something over time. The moment that stayed with me the most wasn't loud. There was no argument, no confrontation, just a moment. A comment that sounded harmless to everyone else, but landed differently, and no one reacted, no one paused, no one noticed, and I stood there, smiling, because that's what the moment required. Later, I tried to replay it, tried to understand why it felt the way it did, but without anyone else acknowledging it, it started to feel like it didn't exist. And that was the part that unsettled me the most, because if something happens and no one sees it, what do you do with it? After that, I changed. Not dramatically, just less. Less reaction, less emotion. And something shifted. He relaxed, like something had finally aligned. Like the version of me he needed was now consistent. And that's when I realized something I hadn't seen before. My reactions had been part of the system. They weren't interruptions. They were variables. And once they were removed, everything stabilized. Dr. Evelyn Hart didn't give me answers. She asked questions. What if nothing is wrong with you? I didn't respond. What if you're not confused, just being guided to feel that way? There was no pressure in her voice, no direction, just space. And for the first time, something made sense without making me the problem. I started looking at things differently. Not
emotionally, structurally, messages, timing, behavior, patterns. And once I started, I couldn't stop, because patterns don't disappear once you see them, they multiply. Sophie wasn't the only one. There were others. Different names, same structure, same rhythm, same sequence. And suddenly, everything I thought was unique wasn't. It was repeated, carefully, consistently, like a system. Every memory changed. Moments I thought were special replayed differently. Words that felt personal felt replicated. Nothing felt random anymore. And that clarity was heavier than confusion. Because confusion gives you hope. Clarity doesn't. I stopped feeling. Not intentionally. It just happened. Emotion was replaced with observation. And something shifted again. This time, he didn't notice. I agreed more, smiled more, reacted less. And for the first time, I felt in control. Not because I was winning, but because I wasn't participating the same way. Clara Voss changed everything. This isn't just about you. And she showed me. Work patterns, professional behavior, reputation control. What I thought was personal was part of something larger, something structured. Everything connected. Every person, every outcome, every pattern. And the question changed. It was no longer about whether he was lying. It was about how far it went. What happened next didn't look like revenge. There was no confrontation, no emotional release, no explosion. Just timing, precision. Information placed exactly where it needed to be. Everything revealed at once. Public. Clear. Undeniable. And for the first time, he had nothing. No explanation. No control. No way to shift the narrative. After that, he reached out. Of course he did. Apologies, explanations, familiar words, familiar tone, the same structure, the same rhythm, the same attempt to restore what had been lost. But something had changed. This time, I didn't respond. No anger, no closure, no reaction. Nothing. Because I finally understood something I wish I had seen earlier. Attention had been the leverage. Reaction had been the control. And silence was the first thing that was ever truly mine. Now, when I think about it, I don't wonder why it happened. I don't wonder what I missed. I don't replay the moments the way I used to. I only ask one question, and it's the only one that matters. Was I ever loved? Or was I slowly rewritten until I forgot who I was supposed to be?